Hey guys, so we got a question here saying this. It says, how can I get over a YouTube addiction? And so a great question, not just related to YouTube, but maybe social media, video games. There's so many things that we can get obsessed with and fixated on and addicted to that as you start it, maybe it's not something sinful or wrong, but it just starts to totally consume your life. And so it's a really good thing to address and talk about. And I'm reminded, you guys can turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and check this out, but 1 Corinthians chapter 6, starting in verse 12, Paul is talking kind of about avoiding sin, avoiding addiction. Specifically in this section, he's talking about sexual sin, but I think this can apply to a lot of things across the board of just our addictive personalities that we might have to be wrestling with. But verse 12, he says this. He says, "You say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything," right? And so in another translation, Paul would say, like, I don't want to come under the power of something else, right? And so the idea here is like YouTube in and of itself might not be something that's wrong or sinful, depends on the content you're watching, of course. But so we have the freedom and the liberty to use it and to enjoy it, right? But at the same time, we see here, Paul says, hey, we're allowed to do anything. We have the freedom to do some of these things. But the reminder is not everything is good for you. And so I think this is a really good spot to just remember as you think about addiction to YouTube, social media, whatever it might be. Not everything is good for you. It can really suck you in for hours and just take you in a place where it truly becomes an addiction. And so the idea of a believer is like we don't want to come under the power of anything other than the Holy Spirit. We want the Holy Spirit to be the thing that is the thing that controls our life and that has the power over our life. And so how do we break free from addiction? Well, we want to get our minds back on Jesus Christ. Later in 2 Corinthians, Paul would say that we should take every thought captive and submit it to the obedience of Christ. And so you have these thoughts of, okay, I want to get back on YouTube. Like, no, you don't want that thought to take you down that direction, but you want to take that thought and be like, Lord, is this the wisest thing I should be doing right now? And acknowledging the Lord and bringing the Lord into these decisions that you're making. Another idea comes from Hebrews chapter 12, where Paul, or the author of Hebrews, tells us that our life of faith is like a race, that we're running a race, and he says to lay aside the weight that can trip us up, right? And so this idea of like as we're running a race, we don't want to run with extra weight that slows us down. And so something like YouTube or an addiction like that is just going to slow you down in your walk with the Lord, in your relationships with other people, and your responsibilities in school and life and job and whatever you have. And so you want to be really aware of laying those things aside. And so how do we do this? Bring people into your life that you trust and that you love. Maybe a pastor, a parent, someone like that, where you're just open and honest about your struggles with addiction. It's good to have some accountability in your life for someone to ask you regularly, hey, how are you doing in this area? And so open up to someone, bring it to the light. So that's a practical way. Another practical thing is I would imagine that it's probably, you're addicted to YouTube on your phone, right? And so practicing some healthy habits with that of maybe you want to leave your phone out in the living room or in the kitchen or downstairs or wherever when the evening's wrapping up. Put some limits on yourself that, hey, you're turning your phone off at 8 p.m., for example, every day. And that's going to put some limits on that. If it's, Jesus would even say like, hey, if something's stumbling us that much, he uses the example of our hand. He's like, cut off your hand or pluck out your eye, right? Not speaking of physical harm to yourself, but this idea of like, what is the thing that's causing you to stumble? We need to cut it out of our lives. And so if it's something that you really can't cut out of your lives, I would suggest going extreme and getting a flip phone, right? Or just getting rid of your phone for a season. And that can be hard and inconvenient, but it's worth it for your spiritual life. And so just some practical things, but coming back to this principle, hey, you're allowed to do things. We have freedom in the Lord, but remembering not everything is good for you. And the Lord has something better for you than just being stuck in addiction. And so he wants to give you the strength and the power to break free. And the final thought here is that you can't do it on your own, right? You can't do it on your own. The Bible tells us that it's not by strength or might, but it's only by the power and the Spirit of God. And so the Spirit of God needs to be the thing that helps you and gives you strength to overcome this. And so submit your life to him. Ask the Spirit to fill your life and to strengthen you, to keep your eyes on him. And by his Spirit, he can bring victory in your life. And so reach out if you have more questions about this, because it would be a great dialogue. And I hope that helps.